Back again with another ASRock based graphics card. This one also looks to be pretty interesting. Hi guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to my channel. Right after checking out an ASRock made graphics card for the first time, that being the Taichi model based on the RX 5700 XT series GPU, I got a chance to take a look at a different model, it too being from another ASRock sub-brand, the Phantom Gaming one, and carrying the RX 5600 XT series GPU. Right away, this very stubby looking design caught my eye. The card is really low in height when you look at it from the fan side, while being really long, which makes it a bit weird looking, sort of like an oversized low profile card. Although it's definitely not one, it takes 2 slots of height, even a bit more than that due to the fact that it has a really thick aluminum heatsink, but more on that later on. It's a bit odd that they went for a solution like this, because then they had to choose smaller fans, this one being 75mm ones. There's a total of 3 of them spanning throughout the whole length of the card. They do have 0 RPM 0 dB fan mode when the card is not under load, and what I've also noticed is that the fans turn on and work separately from each other from time to time when the card does go under load. It could be a feature, I've seen it on some other cards, but that could also be due to difference in startup current needed for them to begin spinning. In this case, the temperatures were roaming around 50 degrees Celsius across the board, but this can and will differ depending on your chassis fan setup. Putting its strange proportions on the side, I do like how the card looks. The top shroud has this subtle but still cool looking red and black pattern. It also feels pretty sturdy and well made, while opposite of that we have a metal backplate which has that recognizable Phantom Gaming series color scheme. Here you can also see by how much the aluminum heatsink overlaps the PCB of the card, nearly half of that length, as well as how thick and narrow it actually is. This area also reveals how many heat pipes does it carry, a total of 3, moving from back to front, where in the first part of the aluminum heatsink we have GPU and VIDA memory contact plate, while the second part of it makes contact with the VRMs and chokes. The total weight of the card is just a bit above 800 grams, and although you would wonder why a mid-range graphics card like this one has such a beefy cooler, you have to remember that RX 5600 XT basically carries a RX 5700 series GPU. To top everything off, ASRock put a well-lit RGB LED Phantom Gaming sign and logo on the side. Although it's not that big, but it still does give you that extra something, and of course you can control and tweak it using ASRock's Polychrome Sync software utility. This RX 5600 XT model based on the Phantom Gaming series is not the only one from ASRock, as they also offer a 2-fan version. It would be interesting to see how this 2-fan one performs cooling wise, while beside that difference between these two versions, we have another one considering the GPU clocks, where the D3 version has higher game and base clocks, although they do have same boost clock of 1750 MHz, while the other one is that they do differ a bit in color scheme of the top shroud, where the D2 version has these silver details, and it's also obviously shorter by about 50mm. Speaking of the clocks, this model has its video memory running at full 14 gigabits per second, despite them still showing it off as 12 gigabits per second on their product page, but if you go under support and VBIOS tab, you can see that they do offer an updated L12 BIOS version, which bumps that up to 14 gigabits per second. Be sure to double check if your card shipped with it or you need to do a BIOS update. As I said, this one had it out of the box, but it's a review sample, so no wonder. As for the GPU clock frequency in practice, it was mostly running at a bit above 1.7 GHz, around 20 to 30 MHz of that claimed boost clock, but it was holding that down pretty steadily without any oscillations. Before I jump over to test figures, let's first take a look at some of my gameplay footage with this card. The live performance data will be shown in the left top corner of the screen. And of course, if you have any questions about this particular model, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to help you out.
What's your status? Tell General Solo this might take a while. If there's anything to recover, we'll find it.
I've got eyes on 2 strike teams. One at the bunker, the other patrolling near the fallen walker.
Good spotting, Agent. We'll take it from here. It's over. Bunker is secure. More rats.
Did nice work here. Targets in vision. This is a clean sector.
Commander, rebel reinforcements inbound.
Weapons free. Neutralize all targets.
Yes, Commander. Understood.
I need to recharge.
Bad guy.
EMP activated. Triple kill. Analyst refined.
Step right up.
The power of destruction.
Taking a look at the benchmarking results, the RX 5600 XT graphics card as a series handles 1440p without any problem, while its forte is more 1080p resolution if you're aiming to game at higher frame rates on a high refresh rate monitor. During my testing, I had to roll back to the 20.2.2 version of the Adrenalin driver because the 20.3.1 version was giving me headaches. It would constantly crash both the game and the system, and this was actually the first time I had any bad experience with a Navi card ever since people started reporting driver issues related to them, but I guess it was bound to happen eventually, considering how often I change and test different graphics cards. The performance can be stretched a bit more with some manual overclocking, but just as with my previous experience when overclocking an RX 5600 XT card, you won't get too far as the software limitation is just a tad higher than the default clocks. As you can see here, the memory was bumped up to 1830 MHz, so that's an 80 MHz jump, while with these settings shown here I was seeing around 1760 MHz for the GPU clock. With this I got around 2 to 3% of performance increase, so nothing fascinating, but again expected based on what I've experienced before with the RX 5600 XT series in general. Since I couldn't push it any further, I've tried my luck with undervolting it, and with lowering down the GPU core voltage by about 60 mV, I managed to get a bit better temperatures and quieter sound profile. Speaking of those, I was seeing the GPU temperature anywhere from 60 to 65 degrees Celsius, depending on the situation and fan speed, a bit above 70 degrees Celsius for the hotspot and video memory. I say depending on the fan speed because it fluctuates quite a bit, reminds me sort of how Gigabyte tunes their fan profiles. It was going anywhere between 11 to 1800 RPM, but mostly around 13 to 1600 RPM during gaming. I really wish they polished that out a bit with a future BIOS update. They can make it run a bit faster, I don't mind it, just make the curve more stable and let it ease in gradually if it really needs to make a fan speed change. With that said, the noise that the fans make is noticeable on an open test bed. It's not unbearable, but it's definitely not the quietest one, that's for sure. It was louder than Gigabyte's gaming and Sapphire's Pulse models. Feel free to check out my comparison review of them, I will put a link to that in the right top corner of this video. Here's a short sound clip of the fans with the card being under full load, while also showing you the sound meter for a measurement comparison. This model uses one 8-pin PCI Express power connector, and according to the GPU-Z readout, it pulls around 130 to 140 watts, while if I subtract the idle system power consumption with the system power consumption during GPU-only load using Firmax stress test, I get a figure of around 210 watts being pulled from the wall. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, that's not the only connector on the graphics card. We of course have an array of video outputs, having one HDMI and 3 display ports, so a pretty standard setup. And that's pretty much it for this model. It's definitely an interesting and a bit quirky product. Could be a good choice for those who cannot go for a wider model, and a lot of the higher end aftermarket Navi cards are like that, and some chassis cannot take them in, so your selection is narrowed down, like for example new Fractal's ITX era, which I'm actually going to review pretty soon, so be sure to subscribe for that one. Anyhow, this model does offer something different, but it also falls behind in other areas compared to its rivals, that being the noise level that it makes, especially comparing to the Pulse model, but in the end it's up to you to decide if that is something that could steer your purchasing decision in other direction. That's it for this time for me. Thank you once again for watching. Please take a second to toss me a thumbs up if you enjoyed my content, that really helps a lot. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe, and if you already are, be sure to press that notification bell down below so you don't miss out on a new video. And until then, catch you later guys.